Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylord, and I'm joined by my good friend Vic Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the fireside and listen. Alright, everyone, we're back. Episode 39, and before I forget it, because I'm terrible at this, hit that like, subscribe, comment for the algorithm god, and comment and stuff like that, because I literally forget that every time. But very excited to have you listening this evening. We've got a great friend of ours, a great friend of mine as well, Boris Michev, hot off the press from winning best overall from Warhammer World Champs. Boris, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi guys, thanks for having me on again. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Boris took CSM to the Warhammer World Champs and came fourth overall, I believe, Boris.
That's right, yeah.
Fourth, and then they combine that with your placing and painting score to win to formulate a best overall champion, which is a combination of the two. And I think you would have won best sporting if they put it up there as well, because
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind, Dave. You're too kind.
Best overall means that Boris is officially the best painter and player in the world, I would say. So
Best
congratulations, Boris.
Okay, I'm already blushing, and we're like 1 minute into this.
And by the way, the best overall was stacked as well. Like, spoiler alert, I played Andrew Gogno, who was, I think, when X and 2 or maybe X and 3, and his army was drop dead gorgeous. There were so many armies that were crazy good painted, like insane painted, display boards, everything. People that have been obviously maining that army for years. So the painting echelon was extremely high, and I don't know where you placed on the painting score, but let's get into that in a moment because I'm already jumping overhead. I'm really excited about to talk about this. Boris, you did a podcast with Nick Nanavati on the Art of War, and that covered kind of your run, what you took. So I kind of wanted to talk about something a little bit different. I wanted to chat about maybe what your thoughts were going into the event, perceptions of the event ahead of time, and then what it was like to be there. It'd be cool if we could cover, obviously, our runs and stuff like that. And then in addition to that, maybe some feedback, and then, would it be worth going for next time? And the overall gist of it, and maybe the meta and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good direction to go. And right off the bat, this was the best Warhammer 40,000 event I've ever been to, and I think it's not even close. And it's sort of all encompassing. I think the organization was amazing, the judges, the TOs, the staff, the venue, the rounds, the approach to timekeeping, just the overall attitude. But then on top of that, you combine that with this incredibly unique and never before seen, the 200 best players minus Vic in the world, all there in attendance. Incredible sportsmanship, camaraderie, hanging out until the little hours of the night, and the entire sort of top echelon of the competitive community in one hotel for 4 or 5 days. And the combination of those two things, I think, made this just a very, very, very special event. I think it's one of a kind, and it will remain on the calendar for years to come as a one of a kind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Vic, I wanted to maybe get you in here. You did win a golden ticket at LGT, of course, but you decided not to go or couldn't go. What was your impressions of what the event would be like? Because I know that you're a little bit skeptical of US events. We had that LVO where we, for lack of better words, had a pretty bad experience last year. And then Warhammer Champs, I feel like we probably had diverging reflections on in terms of what we thought of it. I kind of thought that was a really fun event. I know you didn't do as well at that event, but kind of what were your thoughts about what the event would be like and what potentially could be like going wrong if you did fly all that way to go and play?
I mean, I have a few hesitations about the GW format in terms of terrain and kind of some bits of it are a little bit different to other tournaments we do, and I think that's the reason why I was a little bit cautious with it. I was like, I have no idea what this tournament's going to be like. Let's let these guys go for it, and I'll see how it is. And what's actually happened is, I think you guys have been to an event of the quality and caliber of WTC, the kind of event where you go to and you come back and you're like, I am so much of a better player because I've been at this event. and been around the people and competed with them. So, I think, well, I'm really interested to hear a deeper thought on your experiences, because you guys have flown a long way. You must be shattered, and now only we're really properly talking about it. I really want to know if you guys think it's an event that you want to kind of keep going to, and that it was a good experience overall.
Yeah, I think one thing that it's kind of funny because Boris, you went to the event, but you haven't been to WTC. Vic, you didn't go to the event, but you have been to WTC. So
You've been to both.
I've been to both, and I think one of the essences, and I think this got said quite a lot, is that it was like an August in November, if you know what I mean. So it when Boris, he said, it's a summit of the 200 best players in the world. That is very much the WTC as well. Like that vibe, I wouldn't say it quite replicated the WTC in the sense of the, just the. It's difficult because WTC always a team event, so there's so much more camaraderie, I think. But in addition to that, it's in Mechelen. Everyone is going to Bar Popular. Everyone is chatting between rounds. There's so much effort going into WTC. So I think if I had to say, I didn't enjoy it as much as WTC, but that is an extremely high bar. That is so far beyond me not going to I'm not going to go to the event. It was an insane event, probably the second best event I've ever played in my life. WTC, probably first as well. But let's backtrack it from there. Atlanta, it's like a 7-hour flight. How did you get there, Boris? Obviously, you flew. Everything all good there? Did you?
Yeah, I was on the same. I was on the same flight with our teammate Brian Seep and also Nassim, and we all hung out at the airport, had a couple of beverages, and we're kind of talking about the event, our expectation, and everyone was sort of saying it going into the event. It was like, oh, this event is insane. Everyone's looking at their pods, and each pod had like multiple world-class players, and everyone was like, we need to change our expectations because this is not like what I kept saying was, if you go to a 200-person event in the UK or elsewhere, right, and you look at who is there, you can count on one hand the number of people that are one of those is going to win the event, and sometimes it's like 2 or 3, right? You go to a UKTC, even like a 400-person super major in the UK, you're like, yeah, Manny, Dave, Vic, maybe Finis is coming, like that's who's going to win this event, right? Whereas you go there and it was literally, I am not even exaggerating, 50 people probably, if not more, had a realistic shot at winning the event.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah. That was how stacked it was. It was absolutely brutal. Boris, what did you think of the kind of pod stages? Because I guess we all had the information that was like the primary piece of information we had, right? Like we submitted our list and then the pods came out. And that was the first time you could start analyzing like, okay, maybe this is what I need to think about, or this is what I need to, research my opponent's pods on the list. Like when your pod got revealed, were you kind of like happy? Were you like, okay, this looks like a very tough pod? I think it's probably fair to say that there was some imbalances in the strength of some pods. And I think that was probably maybe a bit of feedback that they'll probably get, is that some of the pods were a little bit tougher than others. But what were your thoughts when you first saw your pod?
So when I first saw my pod, I had Nick Nanavati, TJ Lanigan, 3 or 4 of the Team Austria, Team Germany, WTC players. So my pod was perceived as one of the softer pods when the stat check sort of pictures were being circulated around.
Yeah.
But I mean, like only one of these 25 will win it, and the players that were there, they're still kind of world-class players, right? So there was no, by the whole definition of it, there was no soft pod. And in fact, one interesting is, I think based on these like ELO rankings, I think they're called, the stat check one.
Yeah.
I think only one person who was ranked 1 in the pod by this actually won their pod. So this goes to show you, like, a lot of these European players, right, that were even unranked or like ELO 5000 or whatever it is that no one's heard of, they ended up winning the pod because guess what? They're amazing players. They just don't play in events that register. And so I was actually pretty happy with my pod, and I had a call with Nick before the tournament, and we kind of went through the lists. I think the combination of player and lists that were in my pod, I thought I have a shot. It's going to be tough, but I have a shot.
Yep. Which is a better position than a lot of people
Yes.
were in, frankly, right? I think a lot of people looked at their pod and were like, well, let's focus on the second half of the tournament.
If you look at the widely considered pod of death, or one of there was 2 or 3, I think yours was one of them, but pod 8 is what everyone said, which is where teammate Liam was, Liam Hackett from Australia, Quinton Johnson from Art of War, a few others. Valentin Schefter from Germany won that pot, and I think he's like ELO 5000. He was like number
Exactly.
17 on the list or something, and he won the pot of death
Yep.
as being super low rank. But guess what? He's like a WTC caliber, one of the best Necron players in the world, and he won that pod.
Yeah.
Right?
No, definitely, yeah. Pot of 8 was kind of crazy as well. He won his pod with Necrons, actually, which is, I think, oh man, there's so much to cover. I think Necrons were a good pick for the event, actually, in hindsight. But yeah, let's whittle back. I think one other piece of feedback that they'll probably get, well, I know that they'll get, is that the tournament format, for having one player get out of the pod and then play double elimination was probably a little bit worse than if they'd gone 2 people from the pod and then single elimination. Because
that was exactly my feedback.
Yeah, because I think if you look at myself, for example, I looked at my pod. My pod was insanely hard. Obviously, in my pod was Manny Chima, who ended up winning. Spoiler alert, won the whole event. But other than that, we had Manny Chima, Anthony Vanella, Andrew Gogno, Thomas Woback, who's the WTC Austria player who's insanely good, won the WTC War Masters. And then we had Brian Daltrey, Mike Pestilence, and then Jaime Paris. And basically, I would say there's probably 10 people that could have made it out of my pod. But the problem is that my list could never actually end up beating Manny Chima's list, I don't think. Which is where, if you're playing in a pod format, if you just have a list that can't beat one list in your pod, it basically means that you're shut out from ever getting out of your pod, probably. Or you're hoping that they run into a terrible matchup so that you can escape your pod, which is a little bit bad if your pods get revealed like a week and a half beforehand, and then you're like, well, I've got no shot getting out of here. So I feel like and you probably agree as well, if it was top 2, it'd probably mean that there's a bit more up for grabs in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, I think there's 2 more consequences of that is, when only one gets out of the pod, but you have 200 players, of which, as we said, 50, 60, 70, as a spectator and as a participant, you want to see more of these top class players actually have a chance to compete for the number 1 spot, right? Obviously, everyone that went into the other bracket could still compete for best overall, but a lot of the top players that were there really wanted to go for that best general. The other thing is the double elimination in the top 8, even triple elimination, it's not great from a spectator point of view. John Lennon ended up playing Manny and myself 5 times.
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to see that, right? John doesn't want it. The spectators don't want. No one wants to see that. That's not interesting, right?
Yeah.
Oh, can he get him on the 3rd time or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Instead, if we had a top 6, like a stacked top 16 single elimination, I think that would be really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Vic, what were your thoughts on the tournament format kind of as a whole?
Well, I mean, I don't really have much say in it. I think it's more interesting hearing you guys discuss that. But I think, in terms of preparation and things, that actually is probably a very interesting topic for both of you guys to cover because, being part of a team like Ignite probably has a very large influence on the way that you prepare for a tournament of this kind of style. And both of you probably have a lot to say about that because you were kind of very closely involved with each other during the process.
Yeah. What I would like to do is before I forget, because I don't want to bring this up like 40 minutes from now, I just want to go set the scene for the listener about what it was kind of like to play there, kind of what the atmosphere was like. So I was fortunate enough to get paid flights and hotel and I believe Boris, you were the same, for the Hyatt Regency. What I would say is that my room was probably 5 times as nice as it ever needed to be. So it actually felt like the first time I'd ever played Warhammer where I was like, man, I'm actually like, this is kind of actually getting a bit serious. I got to pay for my hotel and everything. So, I mean, that was brilliant. But basically what it looked like, guys, is the Hyatt Hotel was a big tower hotel, and then you would go down a couple of escalators, and you would go to one of their big conference rooms. And that's where the main hall was. And that encompassed Age of Sigmar, Kill Team. In addition to that, it also had, obviously, the Warhammer 40k. But not only that, but it had the sickest, the dopest grand narrative event, which I had the pleasure of Lim, one of the judges from WTC, of course, as well, show me around the grand narrative event. And the Grand Narrative event was like insanely cool. I'm not gonna lie, like part of me really wishes that they had huge grand narrative events in the UK because it looked really awesome. You just had people, tons of people dressing up in cosplay. They had different planet systems that had different environments in it and different rooms, and they had a live screen that showed the update of the grand narrative and then how each like the Imperium faction was doing on this planet and reinforcements, and then they had a warlord which was kind of like a judge and like a dungeon master of that planet that would facilitate and then hand out random like objectives to people to do mid game and stuff like that, and it was really cool. I thought the grand narrative event was really special and looked like everyone was having a blast. Boris, did you get a chance to check out the grand narrative?
I mean, yeah, just like peeking into the hall and seeing all the participants in their, in their costumes. I mean, it looked insane. If the World Championships wasn't as amazing as it was, I'd be tempted to go for the for the
Yeah.
grand narrative myself.
Yeah, it looked awesome. And then in terms of the hall, look, I really want to give a big shout out to Mike Brandt and the team, from all the staff, the streamers, the casters, everyone. It really felt like Games Workshop were trying to put their absolute best foot forward on a polished event, and they just knock it out of the park first time around. Because, to be honest with you, the event wise was pretty much run, from my perspective, flawlessly. There was
I
nothing going
agree.
wrong. Yeah. Boris, you had to play till 2 a.m. one morning, which I think was
Yes.
probably like not the greatest. You had to play Servo Skulls as well, which I think, realistically speaking, they probably could have just played a really, take and hold Chilling Reign. And if two people have to play that twice, like, who really cares, Like, Servo Skulls was pretty much a meme, and there was about 30, 40 people watching the game at 2 in the morning memeing about Servo Skulls.
By the way, including Mike Brandt and the entire judging staff and everyone else, they were still there until 2 a.m. And not only did the event run flawlessly as far as organizational, timekeeping, etc., but it felt like every member of staff, whether it was a judge, the head TO, head of organized play of Games Workshop, everyone treated you with so much respect. Like, this is the World Championships. You are the best competitors of 40K in the world. You've earned the right to be here. We'll respect you and we'll uh, be kind and will cater to your needs. Like, their attitude towards timekeeping, conflict resolution, everything was just so professional. And maybe sometimes the bar is set low in 40K events of what we expect with the venue or judging staff or whatever the case might be. I just think this was, for me, just like a different level of professionalism. You could see like the force of a multi-billion-dollar public company, which is Games Workshop, was put behind that to say
Mhm.
like, first ever world champs, we're gonna knock it out of the park, and they did, like,
Yeah.
in every way.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that they teamed up with the WTC as well, because I think what you're experiencing there, Boris, is really the rubbing off of WTC, and a lot of those judges in the room were the WTC judges, like Matthew Lim and stuff like that, Tom Adry as well, and those guys, you can tell that they're so passionate about the game and passionate about judging as well, that they rule in such a way, and they interact with players in such a way that's like friendly and competitive and professional all at the same time. And it doesn't matter if something doesn't even go your way on a judge call, maybe. They make it such that that's how it is, and yeah, just really well handled overall. Alrighty, maybe we should cover off kind of expectations. That's a good one.
Hmm.
What were your expectations kind of going into it, Boris?
It's funny because all of us are, all of us are very, and I mean all of us, I mean pretty much all 200 players are competitive 40K players that are used to winning,
Yeah.
right? Either winning events or coming or podiuming or. And we all kept telling each other, right? Oh, but we got to change our expectations for this event because it's so stacked. But we know deep down, all of us still kind of thought and wanted, like, we want to win still, right?
Mhm.
So it created this conflict, right? Because I think at the end of day one, we were all having dinner together and having drinks, and we're counting the number of world-class players that had already lost, and it was insane.
Yeah.
It was like something like 20 multiple super major winners had already lost in their first game or their second game.
Hmm.
So my expectations going in were, I was trying very hard to kind of rein my expectations in, out of respect for the field. I was still kind of hopeful that maybe I can get out of my pod if I get a couple of good pairings and some things go my way and some people knock each other. I felt like that's possible, but that was kind of like an outside upside. Maybe I get there.
Mm.
And I really, obviously, I went there to try and compete for best overall. But when I saw, and we can talk about the army painting, but when I saw the quality of the armies and the players that were piloting, I was like, okay, you gotta, yeah, this is gonna be very hard.
Yeah, yeah. We can dive into that. Were there any armies that really stuck out at you? I know I saw a couple of armies. Manuel, who I played at the end of round 8 from Germany, who's had a beautifully painted army. Gonyo, like I said, had a great army, and then there was a Space Marine army that had the blue Space Marine army that had all the freehand drawings on the front of like the Vindicators and stuff too, which was like obviously insane as well.
Dude, it was, I will tell you, for a world championship where, the vast majority of players are like, GT major winners from across the world, the quality of the armies in the showcase was insane.
Mm.
I earlier in the year we talked about this, when I won best overall at Warhammer Fest. Um, Walking around the showcase there and walking around the showcase here was the difference between like a best painted at a GT and like an actual Golden Demon painting competition. The quality of the armies was insane.
Mm.
When I was playing Nick round 2, when the painting judge came around to our table and said like your army's been selected to the showcase, and I started jumping and celebrating because I was so happy. I
Yeah,
think they selected, do you remember, like maybe like 15 or
yeah.
something armies, right? And then me and you together walked around in the evening to go and see them. And I was like, my army is almost definitively the worst looking army out of this bunch, and like being objective. So I was like, I gotta win some games if I want to have a chance, right?
Yeah, I think if there was like 15 people, your army probably, like, fairness to everyone else, your army was probably in the bottom third, right? But like,
Correct.
don't
Correct.
like the listener, by the way, like Boris's armies are painted very, 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 very well, and Boris is an exceptionally painted, exceptionally good painter. So that just goes to show you the quality. There was a
So
guy
to
from
give you a sense, basically what they did is they went around old 100 tables and they gave everyone a score, which I think 30 was like it's passable. You're not gonna get points
Mhm.
deducted. 50 was like okay, this looks nice, and if you got a 70, okay, you go to the showcase.
Mm.
And out of 200 armies, like 15 to 20 maybe got put on the showcase, and then 3 separate judges went afterwards to each one and spent like a solid 20-30 minutes at each army with a detailed painting sort of rubric, and they rated each army, and you could go plus and minus 15 from your 70. So the highest you can get is 85 and the lowest you can get is all the way down to 55. So my army scored 73.
Mm.
So that means that the 3 judges combined only gave me 3 extra points over and above just qualifying from the showcase. I think Gonyo's army, which was this incredible Tau army, got like 78, and his
Wow.
army was insane. So that just tells you like
Yeah.
how hard it was to get these extra points. We had a funny thing, me and him, like every round we'll go to each other's table and be like, "Have you lost yet?" And we're like, quote unquote, cheering for each other to lose.
Yeah.
But the reality is, there were 15 people competing for best overall, and
Yeah.
I knew like some of these armies are so much better painted than mine, then it probably mathematically means I need an extra win to
Mhm.
overcompensate that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and there was a gorgeous Eldar army as well. I forget. I think there was some of the French player who actually got in the top 8. Um, his army was stellar as well. The guy playing the Wraith Guard, 5 Wraith Guard in the
Oh, Ludovic, yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah,
guy,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
man,
yeah, yeah.
so good. I've actually been a little bit inspired, Boris. I'm actually low key going to start doing some basing tonight. I got a few projects that I'm going to be working on now, and
That's how you know it's been a successful event where you come back and you feel inspired to do something, right?
yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I guess my expectations were yeah, I never really believed I could make it out of my pod. If I was being honest, I needed a lot to go right. I needed either Vanilla or Gonyo to beat Manny, and then or like Thomas Woback or something to beat Manny, and then I mean, Manny and I have obviously just played and played and played like every single event. So I was just obviously in the back of my mind, I was like, well, obviously I'm going to play Manny, which actually for the first event in I think maybe even like 10 events that we've both been to. I didn't end up playing in, which was nice. But that was kind of my expectations going in. I was like happy, 4-1. Maybe if Manny gets an unlucky run versus an opponent that could actually beat him, then I could maybe squeak it out if he goes 4-1, basically. So that was my expectations going into it. And then, I just kind of try and take one game at a time. I played Coventry the weekend before, and then the team event that Boris and I won together the weekend before that. So I had quite a bit of practice, but I ended up going 5-3, which I think overall it's hard not to be disappointed, right? Because I think like Boris said, is that a lot of us are used to winning, and this is a bit of a reality check on top of that as well. I think if I look back on maybe like 6 months from now, how I did, and I think I'd probably be like okay happy with it. I kind of, the games that I lost, I felt like I maybe could have won, but I think overall probably 7 out of 10 happy. 6.5 out of 10 happy, maybe.
The thing is, Dave, right? If you look at most of your wins and most of your losses, right? And the same applies to me and applies to almost everyone there. The margins of victory in this event were so incredibly slim on either side, right? I mean, in the hours and days since, I'm sure you are, and I'm going through my head through all my games, both the ones I won and the ones I lost, and think about little small things that if it only had gone slightly different, the game would have been. I mean, I think the combined losses, I think our teammate Brian lost 3 or 4 games for a combined victory point differential of like 6 or 7 across the 3 or 4 losses that he had. I mean, that's how fine the margins were in this tournament, right? So if you look at the record itself, it's very hard to, usually you can extrapolate a win-loss record and say like, did you do well at an event or not? But given the field here and the margins of victory and loss being so small, the record is a little bit, and we always hang on to the record, I lost 3 games, right? Or whatever it is, that's terrible. But it's so different in this event. And I think hopefully next year we'll go into this event with a better mental preparation and a better attitude, right? We're not going to approach this event as any normal, like, oh, it's a Coventry Super Major, 7 round, and I'll try and win kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think next year my goal will just be to do better than I did the previous year, I think. Because every single game I played felt like a Super Major finals game. And
I agree.
Every single game. And when you put it in perspective of, if you played 8 Super Major finals games and you win 5 out of 8, you're probably pretty happy, realistically speaking.
Hey, you've just won 5 Super Majors.
Only 3.
That's pretty good.
And so my games were often within 2 points, 4 points, needing to get not even lucky for the draw, positions like that. So I think you're right. When you look back on it, it's easy to look from the outside perspective and think, well, X and 3. But reality is, there's a lot of context around those games in and of themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, you had legitimate world-class players. What I mean by world-class players, top 10 in the world players, which is an extremely high bar, losing 3-4 games, right? And trying to win, not just like one thing that, by the way, on that topic, one thing that really kind of pleasantly surprised me is that on days 3 and 4, for those that weren't in the top 8, I thought, you know what, this format is pretty great for those going in the top 8 or those competing for best overall. But I just wonder, like, people that are not in the top 8, are they going to take those last 3 games seriously? And oh my gosh, like the level of competition in those games that would normally be the quote unquote the losers bracket was insane. Everyone you spoke to was like, this is the hardest RTT or GT that I've ever played in my entire life.
Yeah, and the spoiler alert, because I will get onto it maybe after I check through my run a bit. The 4-1 bracket was bonkers. And no one in the 4-1 bracket was familiar with losing, and no one in that bracket likes to lose. So
I would go as far to say that the 4-1 bracket was harder than the top 8 because the quality of the players was almost identical, if not identical,
Yeah.
but there was more of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was crazy. Okay, before we go to that, Boris, I think your run was covered in the Art of War. Did you guys chat through every single round you guys
Yeah,
played?
we chatted through every game, so we don't have to repeat that. Let's
Okay.
go through your run. Yeah.
Yeah, so I brought Eldari, which I thought at the time was probably the best army for me to play. I took a pretty well-rounded list, and I got to play at 2 tournaments beforehand, so I felt like I was pretty well prepped. But the terrain, I wasn't, the terrain is the terrain, right? Like you can build a list for the terrain, or you can sort of just have a great list and hope that when you show up, the terrain is pretty good for your list. The terrain was overall like pretty solid for my list. It wasn't as good as the UKTC terrain feels for Eldari, but it wasn't like a massive net difference. So round one, I'm in against a guy called John Sweet, who won a GT playing Eldari. So straight up, I got the mirror matchup. And I think this is probably a pretty common piece of feedback for this one, is that the Dawn of War layouts for Games Workshop terrain are awful. They are shockingly badly developed. The terrain makes almost 0 sense for that terrain layout. It's very easy to get shooting angles, and there's basically no deployment zone coverage, especially if you get the really bad Dawn of War layout. Did you kind of find the same thing for your one?
Yeah, basically, when we turned up there the night before and we're walking around the tables, we're all like, these tables have already been set up. They're all different layouts, but everyone's playing Dawn of War. So we looked at it in some of the layouts. It was like, oh, that's pretty good. I can hide a rhino here. I can put a spinner here.
Mm-hmm.
And then other ones, he was like, but the terrain looks like backwards. It's
Yeah.
going the other way. I can't hide anything, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, if my opponent moved 8 inches from their deployment zone, they could shoot into my deployment zone. It's like, well,
Exactly, yeah.
that's not great. So yeah, as will be common for this episode, I play against the mirror matchup, and I go second. And then my opponent jams their whole army at me, and yeah, I try and win. Yeah, so I play against John Sweet, lovely chap. Eldari's got the 10 Wraith Guard, he's got Income plus Avatar. So interesting game. I'm pretty practiced in the mirror, so I'm feeling comfortable with that one. But once again, it would have been nice to just go first with my 3 spinners and lock his army down.
I think, Dave, one interesting thing to comment here is what Vic was kind of asking us before is, the team preparation. I think for Yoko, yourself, and me, because we were on Eldar CSM, and then obviously Liam on Death Guard and Brian on T-Suns. But for Eldar and CSM, I think our team in those matchups, Eldar Mirror, CSM Mirror, Eldar versus CSM, which we thought are kind of the top 2 factions going into this event, which actually turned out to be true.
Yeah.
We as a team were so well practiced into these different permutations, right? The 2 mirrors and then the Eldar CSM matchup, that in my games against Eldar, of which I played, I think, 2, and my mirrors into CSM, of which I think I played 3, I just felt like I knew almost every time better than my opponent how this is going to go and how I should play it, right? And 100% of that came from the amount of games that were played amongst our teammates, and then feedback fed back. It's like, in the Eldar CSM mirror, you should do this, right?
Yeah.
Or in the Eldar mirror, go in second, you should do this. So it's a common theme for you, and it's a common theme for me that in these mirrors and the Eldar CSM, I think we felt really well prepared.
Yeah, you feel like even if there is a favorable turn, that you have such depth of knowledge of the matchup that you can navigate it despite it maybe not going your way. All right, round 2, and this is a common theme: World Eaters. Fantastic. Now, World Eaters, I think, is a good matchup for Eldar. However, if you go second, it can really put you under pressure. Now, what I would say about this event is that because they weren't using clocks, World Eaters kind of suffered a little bit because they're as Nick explained to me, they're face up. Everything's, there's no tricks. They face up. Everything, they can auto advance 6, they get +2 to move, advance and charge. You move your 23 from the deployment zone, or, out of the rhino, I don't know, it's like, 9, 15, 17 inches from the rhino and stuff like that. So they're kind of an army that if you've got enough time, you can spend making great turns or counter-punching them on the early turns. And that's kind of how these games went for me. I played against a lovely guy called Mike Pestilence, who has a blog as well, who was actually really, really good. Well, I guess everyone there was really good. And then I'm going second, so not great. I think deployment-wise, if you get a bad deployment going second against World Eaters, then or a bad mission, then you're definitely not favored. You're favored on every deployment and mission if you go first against them. But I managed to eke out a win there, a 15-point win. But the game was actually really close. It could have been a 3 or 4-point win, but it was one of those games where it was singles. Mike knew that he had to go for a bigger risk that if it didn't pay off, would have been a bigger point detriment. But if it did pay off, it would have been a chance for him to win the game. So, as is kind of often with those singles event games. So, yeah, go second in that game. Fantastic. By fantastic, I mean not really that great. And then the round that really stung me was I played against Brian Daughtry, who is Daughtry, I think that's how I pronounce his name. A really good player on World Eaters again. And yep, going second again. I don't think I could roll over a 1 or 2 for my go first. Go second here. Not a great position. I ended up losing this game by 2 points. I made a mistake where I teleported Manny on turn 1 too aggressively, and then his Master of Executions jumped out of Rhino and killed it. Despite that, almost managed to win that one. To get a draw, I just needed to kill a Rhino on 4 wounds on an objective, and my Night Spinner could shoot directly at it with the indirect, and I had 4 Wolf Spiders as well. So, mathematically, getting pretty unlucky not to kill the Rhino there for the draw, and that one kind of stung a little bit. But second, 3 out of 3 games. And then I got rewarded for my loss. As soon when you take a loss in a tournament, Boris, you're like, okay, I'm in the X1 bracket. It's going to be a little bit of a cruisier one, right? Oh no,
not at this event.
No. Of course, I get paired up into Anthony Vanilla, who's 3-0, playing World Eaters, of course. Bit of a better mission for me, at least. But lo and behold, of course, second again. Anthony and I had an absolutely lovely game. He played really well, made just one little tiny mistake, but a really technical game. Obviously, Anthony's a world-class player, especially on World Eaters as well, coming off the back of the Kelly Cup win there as well. So he is the current World Eater, I think, as we all know. So yeah, I managed to pip that one by a 9-pointer, but once again, that was kind of a game where Anthony had to go for a little bit of a risky play as well towards the end there. I finally got a little bit of a nice dice roll there where I actually shot 10 Wraithguard into 6 8-bound and cleaned them fully on that 10 Wraithguard. So that was the first bit of sail in my wind in my sail, I think. But yeah, at that rate, played 3 World Eaters in a row and gone second every game. So it's not the start I'm after, but I'm 4-1 currently there. 3-1 currently. And then my run gets a lot easier.
But surely get rewarded in your next game, right?
Yeah, I mean they get a lot easier after that.
Yeah, they get a lot easier.
Andrew Gagnon for the for the 5th game of the pod. Now Andrew's an absolutely fantastic guy. I think the cool thing about the tournament, Boris, I don't know how you feel about this, but it was nice to play 8 new people that you never played before.
Yeah, and not just 8 new people, but 8 like incredible players, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you go to let's go to a GT in Arizona and just play 8 random people that we don't know, but it's just kind of whatever. Like you played 8 new people and they were like, oh, these are amazing players.
Yeah, and maybe 4 out of 8 of them you've probably chatted to online or you've known for a couple of years. You just haven't hit, right? Yeah, so got the chance to play Andrew Gagnon, and I knew this guy was a legend. And I was like, great. He had a really cool list with like 40 breaches, 5 devilfish, and 20 pathfinders. As we talked about before, gorgeous army, an absolutely fantastic opponent. Probably my favorite game of the entire event, maybe. It's really close because I played another fantastic opponent. I played all fantastic opponents. But
and you know what's interesting why you ended up playing him is because the round before, and they were on the table next to him, he played Manny. Manny. And Manny was very worried about Gonyo's list because the volume of shots that he had into his accursed bricks. So they played the mission where the objectives disappear, and Manny does the most Manny thing in the world where he literally deploys his entire army in one corner of the board, looks at Gonyo and says, that's going to be the objective that stays. And sure enough, they roll for it. That's the objective that stays, and Manny wins. And that's why Gonyo's first loss put him down into and paired him into you for round 5.
Yeah, which to be fair, if Gonyo had beat Manny, I would have played Manny. So.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's the kind of event we're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. So I played Andrew Gagnon, a super technical one. This is another one where the clock having no clock was just to be honest with you, just really good for me because Eldar, you can never really lose to Tau. If you play it tight, you can lock your opponent out of the game. And I ended up taking quite a bit of time on turns like 2 and 3. And I actually apologized to Andrew when it came to turn 3. I said, look, Andrew, I know I've taken a lot more time than you, and we're not playing on clocks. So I'm going to try and speed up as fast as possible. But the only reason I'm doing that is because I know if I don't make a mistake, like it's going to be very hard for you to win the game. Like it doesn't matter if whatever kind of dice rolls happen or anything like that. If I just play and lock you out, then you're not going to be able to win. And he was like, mate, you're 100% right. It's all good. And absolutely lovely guy to play against. Very technical. I wish him all the best for his Team USA application as well. An extremely talented player. You can just tell that by the way that these guys think and talk about the game. Irrespective of whether they lost. We chatted about the game for like 10 minutes afterwards, and for about 30 minutes of the game, I just sat there looking at his gorgeously painted tower. So, yeah, lovely. So exit the pod, 5-1, 4-1. So overall, pretty happy about that. But the run for me gets even harder. I play against Eetu Peltola, who is the captain of Team Finland. Amazing.
And just before that, I think us going to dinner that night, I think one thing that struck me about your attitude about the following days, what I touched on earlier was, as I said, I kind of fear that people would take it more of a social kind of thing after day one if they didn't make it out of the pot. But you were like, no, I'm laser focused. It's the World Championship. I'm still playing for 9th place. It would be incredible if I can finish 9th in the world, right? And that kind of struck me. And then the next day and the following day, I actually saw that this was by far the pervasive attitude of everyone playing in the 4-1, 3-2 brackets. Everyone trying to win and compete and and respect the competition in the tournament rather than just go and get drunk and say, well, I've lost, I've taken my first loss, I can't win the event. Like normally you might see people in a regular event, right?
And that's what I told lots of people. Actually, I said, look mate, only 4% of people are playing the top 8. That means 96% of people go and play a new tournament where 9th place is effectively winning the tournament, right? Which is crazy, right? And let's maybe this would be a good time to chat about the kind of effects of the first person out of the pod, because what kind of ends up happening is that the person who's X1 exits the pod, right? Sure, but every pod has about three people in the pod who probably could win the entire tournament as well. And
correct.
Then what ends up happening is those 3 people evidently basically go X1. So the X1 bracket after the top 8 gets secured is basically the top 3 people from each pod who are 3 people that could win the entire event. So you're basically playing an RTT where every single person could win the world champs. Like the pod is crazy. It was like Jack Hardster, John Lennon, Richard Seeger, Liam Vissel, myself, Yoko, Quinton, Manuel, like Eetu, I just rattled off 10 names, right off the top of my thing without even looking at it. The X1 bracket was absolutely stacked. It was crazy. So by the way, I've gone second every single game so far. Just put that out there. Round 6 against Eetu Peltola, the captain of Team Finland, basically the best player in Finland. Not the person you really want to be hitting in this one. Eldari Mirror, I go second again, which is obviously not great, especially he's got an Avatar of Cain, which if you go second with the Avatar of Cain, it basically gets locked out of the game. And he's got a Farseer and a Warlock in the mirror, which is really bad in the mirror. And so if I went first, it was almost lights out, but I ended up doing a really stupid thing. I was like, I'm going to shoot my Rangers and snipe your Spirits here with your Wraith Guard. And then, of course, his Wraith Guard shoot, and I lose all the momentum in the game. He also made 3 natural 11-inch charges, which, if I was going to lose that game, I was definitely losing after that. Brutal game. That was my biggest loss, that one. But I felt really depressed after that game, actually. Not gonna lie. That was a game where I played the Eldari Mirror, which I'm super practiced in. I'm now X2, so 9th place is out of the knocking. And I was feeling pretty down at that point. But I had a really good chat with Nick, lovely guy who I met at one World Champs playing T-Suns. And yeah, he just came up and said, "Hey, I love the podcast," and we're just chatting about it and just chatting about tons of stuff, man, about life and yeah, he really helped pick me up. And I said, "Look, I'm X2, but I'm going to try my absolute best to win my next 2 games." And he said, "You know what? It's acceptable to fall down, but it's not acceptable not to get back up." So that was kind of my mentality going into it. Right, now, if I didn't just play the best player in Finland, well, I get to play probably the best GSC player in the world. Yeah, round 7, fantastic. Alex McDougall. Yeah, lovely. Probably not a great matchup for Aldari, and Aldari's... It's an interesting one because basically everyone in the room has lots of practice against Aldari, which is, not a great position to be in if you're trying to get a good run at a tournament. But not only that, but I basically have 0 games into Gene Stealer Cult, and it's Alex McDougall playing it, who is like... I played him 2 years ago at LVO. Was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago at LVO Top 8, where he beat me, and he was playing the exact same thing. The guy literally just plays Tyranids and GSC. So, yeah, it was a rematch, actually, which I was really happy to get, though, because... someone knocks me out of a big tournament, I'm like, always tell them, like, look, man, I'm gonna get you next time. And yeah, super lovely, man. Alex is like a super lovely guy. I told him, like, hey, look, Alex, I haven't played the matchup much, and can you just run me through like some of the common things? And I'll be like, hey, what's the math on this? He'd just tell me straight up, right? And that's the type of guy he is. So really close game, end up winning by 8 points, but could have been so many things that could have changed that game. It was one of those games, Boris, we just get the craziest rolls like consistently. It's just like, I rolled massively high on that, or he rolled massively low on that, and then I rolled massively low on that. It's like, it wasn't one of those games where everything could just go nice and neatly. It was like, no, like, you shoot your whole brick and then deal 1 damage to my incount, or I overwatch your squad, or I shoot my warp spiders and I roll 8 shots. It's like, well, okay. Yeah.
I think one thing that stood out to me that game was obviously 2 world-class players, both kind of lost 2 games, but still trying really hard, trying to win. But at one point I came to your table and I was like, Dave, is the game close? He said, very close. I need to grab you for 10 minutes because I'm about to play Valentine on Necrons and I don't have any idea what Necrons do. And you were both like, okay, let's take 10 minutes, stop our game, and you sit down with me and like run through the list and say, don't shoot this, don't go this, take this, and then like 10 minutes. That was just the spirit. To me, that was like the spirit of the tournament, right? Where everyone is trying to win, everyone's competing, but like it was so... I don't know, like the camaraderie, the sort of the respect, just when would you like, imagine you're like playing another top player in like Leicester Final Four and someone comes and says, hey, take 10 minutes off your game to come run me through a list. Like this would just never happen, right?
Yeah, it would never happen. And that's obviously the type of guy Alex is as well. He'll just be like, dude, go help your teammate, man. Like, of course.
Yeah, that was really great.
Was that the point where I was taking the photo of like the middle of the board?
Yeah, you were taking the photo. You're like, and your game was like on a knife's edge.
Knife's
edge,
yeah.
It's not like I was interrupting like a blowout.
Yeah.
There was a foregone conclusion. He was like, you guys fighting for your lives because you've both just lost 2 games and trying to like, come back, and you're like, yeah, I'll take 10 minutes. Let's look at this Necron list.
This was literally when I had my cell phone over the middle of the board, taking a photo of my position of my Wraith Guard, because I told Alex, like, look, I don't want to phantasm and then lose my position where they were and then go back and forth and then whatever, right? Like, take a photograph of it. And he had wrapped my Wraith Guard with 2 demo squads, and it was like, well, where are your demolition guys? Like, here, and now 6 inches. Can you see over this? And I was like, okay, well, I have to work out this super intricate puzzle where I phantasm away to reduce the amount of damage, and then once you shoot one unit, I pull the other guys, and it was like the most intense turn of probably like maybe the whole tournament for me. And it was Alex is just like, yeah, of course, man. Like, go help your teammate. Like, cool, okay. And then we're back at it. Yeah, lovely guy. So. Yeah, Alex McDougall round 7. I actually went second this game, of course, which was the first time going second was good. So despite going second 8 out of 8 games, it was beneficial once. So not going to complain on that one. It was good. And then, yeah, it just keeps getting easier and easier for me, mate. Yeah, Manuel from Team Germany, who's like a 5-time WTC Germany veteran, an absolute machine of a player as well. I've never played him before, but an insanely good player. Ended up going second this game, which was really heartbreaking because of his list, he really had to deploy tons of stuff on the line. If I go first, it's just a blowout. I crank my Wraith Guard into him, kill like 4 tanks on turn 1, and it's basically game over. But yeah, we played to another 2-point game where I could have won if some things had gone my way, and they just didn't end up going my way. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it, Boris. Is like I went 5-3, but on the whole, I feel like Tom Adry actually came to my rounds. He came to my table round 4 when I got paired up into Anthony. Round 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every single time he came to my table, he said, David, I can't believe the players that you're hitting. Like, your run is just the dumbest run. Like, I'm going to buy... He said at me at one point, he's like, I'm going to buy you like a 15-kilogram trophy just for like the run that you've had to have. Because he understood like, oh, he's going second again. Like, this is bad. And then I was like, yeah, So, yeah, I think...
I think your run was outrageous, right?
Yeah.
Not just in the quality of the players, but the types of matchups and going second. But I'll challenge you one thing.
Mhm.
Go and look at some of the other top players there that went 4-1 in their pod
Mhm.
and what their run was, because I think a lot of it was, yes, your run was insane, but also the tournament was such that if you went 4-1 in the pod, right?
Mm.
And every pod means that you won in the pod, so you played against other people who won in the pod, and the way the pods were stacked. So in your pod, going 4-1, you would have beaten 1, 2, 3 really good players, right, and lost to a really good player. And then you go into the Shark Tank, which was the 4-1 pod, and then by definition, all 3 games there would have been incredibly hard.
Yeah.
So it would be an interesting thing to plot out, maybe even some of our teammates and their runs, and just be like, oh. Well, yeah, everyone who went 4-1 in the pod had an insane run.
Yeah. Like maybe if you're a listener and you were there, maybe drop us a knock of what your of the 3 players you played on the 3rd and 4th day, because yeah, you're right, and it was basically like a 3-rounder against the best 20 players in the world almost, right? And it was kind of like, well, okay, you went 1 and 2 against the best 20 players in the world on any given day. Mission, go first, go second, army matchup dependent, right? Which is, I think, like, not, it's on the, obviously that's on the bottom end of the spectrum in terms of performance, but like, it's not like that spectrum's pretty close, right? Like 1 and 2, 2 and 1, 2-point games, whatever like that. Something goes your way, then maybe it's different, right?
And the difference, we mentioned this before about the record, right? Where normally we judge it by the record, but the reason why it's even more amplified here is because when you get that small loss, right, 2-point loss against Anthony Vanella, whatever. Normally in a normal event, your next pair, you're allowed to kind of claw back yourself up once you've taken 1 L, and you end up usually at most you're taking 1 loss. That's where you expect it to. But as we saw through your run and the runs of many other, you get a terrible, heartbreaking 2-point loss on the last thing, and then bam, here's a super major winner.
Yeah. You basically lose, and then there's a good chance you play an even harder round, basically.
Exactly, which normally doesn't happen, right? Sometimes it can happen, like you play LGT or something like that. It's a big enough event, and sometimes 2 losers that are both very good match up against each other, right? But normally that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Here it happened every round. If you're in the 4-1 bracket,
it's crazy. Like, if you look at the people that went like 2 and 3 in their pod, and it's like, these players are literally some of the best players in their respective countries, and you're like, okay, like, Ennis Wilson, for example, who I think is probably one of maybe the second best player in the UK. Like, I think he went 2 and 3 or something like that, maybe in his pod, maybe a 2-2-1. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but obviously Ennis is an insanely good player, and when you see people like that, or some of your friends that are also insanely gifted, or put a ton of hard work in, going X and 3, X and 2, you're like, okay, that just goes to show the caliber of the event, which I think is just the overarching theme of the event, really, isn't it? It's like the caliber of the event. It's just like every single game you play is the hardest game of your life, probably.
Correct. When I was playing round 2, I was playing against Nick, and we played like a 4.5-hour game. So we had, I don't know, like 30, 40 people at our table hanging out at the end. It was really good vibe. And people were coming and saying like, Ines lost, Nassim lost, Liam lost. It's like the number of people that were just like, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, now I understand how this is gonna go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's really crazy. So it's that was my run. I think looking back at it, I think I probably it's difficult. Maybe I shouldn't have played Aldari, only because a lot of people were very, very prepared for it. And actually, it's the type of army that you need to make almost 0 mistakes. If you make 0 mistakes, which is practically impossible to do in such a tight event, like if you go play like a big super major in the UK, like you can make some mistakes here and there against a player that is where the skill difference is really big. But if you're playing basically a finals equivalent game every single game, to play an army like Eldari and not make a single mistake in any of those games is not really feasible when I look back on it, I don't think.
But with the benefit of hindsight, and we never have the benefit of hindsight, but because you're on a podcast, what would you have taken?
I think the best army was probably. Oh, I mean, it's easy to obviously say the best army was CSM going into it, but you know what? Oh man, I think Necrons were a good choice for me personally. You know, I had a lot of reps on Necrons, and a lot of players don't have a lot of reps against Necrons. So I actually think in the environment like Warhammer World Champs, I think it's actually quite good to have an army that's maybe a bit binary that people don't have a lot of practice into. So, for example,
See, I don't agree with that.
really,
I really don't agree with that because I think my answer to the question I asked you was you should have taken Eldar with the benefit of hindsight, because I think to world champs you need to take an army that is going to be has the highest ceiling possible and also a very high degree of predictability in your performance, right? I agree with you that you need to play very, very good, right? But you need to play very, very good no matter what you bring because it's the world champs, right? So like even if you bring CSM and you don't play flawlessly, you're not gonna win those games against the top players, right?
yeah,
So you might as well bring an army that, like, if executed to perfection, you're gonna win. Because
yeah, that's true.
the other thing is also, like, let's not forget, like, you got unlucky. I got a bit lucky. Like in a tournament like that, the best you can do is bring a top army that you're super practiced with that can win any matchup, right? That can be played to perfection, and then hope that some things go your way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
And I guess you're right. Like if I played Necrons and went 5-3, I probably would have been like, well, maybe I should have played Eldari.
yeah, and with the benefit of hindsight, I think Necrons is almost an auto loss for CSM, for Necrons into CSM. Like
yeah.
went into that game with very little knowledge of the matchup. With the benefit of hindsight, that's a very difficult game, and you would have hit some CSM players and be like, well, I'm a dummy. I brought an army that's pretty soft into the top army in the game. Like, what am I doing? Right?
Yeah, it's true. Or maybe World Eaters or something like that, which I played. If I looked at the run that I had, I would have played World Eaters 3 times, which would have been probably 3 games of 3 hour slugfests reanimating my
Yeah.
warriors. So yeah, I think you're probably right actually. Yeah.
Would you have done anything different prep wise?
You know what? Honestly, next year I might play guard or equivalent of, and then go for best overall, best painted as well. Genuinely, because I think that that is such a cool achievement to have as well.
I'll tell you though. Obviously, you saw the quality of the armies,
Mhm.
right? Which means that if you take the effort, and you can definitely do it, because I've seen your best painted stuff, you can have an army that gets selected for the showcase. I believe in that. But then you have to you have to go like 7-1, right?
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes really, really hard, because this event, like the top players, a lot of top players have amazing armies, and yeah, I don't know. I think we were pretty well prepared as a team, right? Going into it, like we'd done a lot of the matchups. But next year, my first thing, like the day after, was like, oh, next year I want us to be like even 10 times more prepared
Yeah.
for this event.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so tough, isn't it? I think there's definitely big improvements we could make as a team. I think like playing more real life on the terrain was obviously the most important.
And play the
is one to do,
missions,
right?
right? We were all
Yeah.
commenting. Like I was playing at 2:30 in the morning on a weird ass mission that I'd never played before, and I was like, this is inexcusable, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't be I'm playing for top 3 in the world, and I'm playing on a mission like John had to like take me aside and explain to me how the scoring works. And you guys had to take me aside and be like, this is how you do it in movie. And I was like, guys, it's 1 in the morning. What is going on? Like
Yeah.
it was inexcusable to not have. And by the way, that wasn't just for server scopes. Like we hadn't played some of these other missions, right?
Yeah.
Layouts,
Yeah.
combinations, and that, in my mind, we can easily fix.
Yeah. I would like to see them maybe standardize or release the mission pack a little bit beforehand, perhaps, so that players could
They
familiarize
did.
themselves.
They said all the missions in the Leviathan tournament pack are in play, and in my preparation for the event, I was playing them in order, but
Yeah.
I think I got to like 3/4 of the way, and I skipped servo schools and some of the weirder ones on my playthrough.
Yeah. I think that was one of my favorite moments of the event as well. There's a couple that's really stand out to me, but when you get paired into John on Server Skulls, and then like we're like take you aside, we're like, no, okay, like here's the strategy. Like if you go first, like you do this intricate thing with the objectives, and then like you kick it backwards, and then like you double kick it, and then and then we were playing our games, we were finishing our games when you were starting, and then like I remember going to the table, I was like, oh, did he go first? It's like, yes, he went first, and I was like, oh, is he doing the strategy? Yes, he's doing the strategy.
By the way, that to me is the most unbelievable thing in the whole event because when you guys were explaining the strategy, I was looking into the nothingness and my soul had left my body. And I know you guys were like, "There's no way what we're saying is registering with this guy."
Yeah.
Then I went to the table, went first, and did exactly what we had just talked about. And I was like, "How did I do that?" And I still lost.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, man. What a fantastic event.
I have to
What?
say, big shout out to John Lennon. I think it's
Yeah.
someone that I really, really, really respect. Like watching their content and just his approach to the game and the hobby and the community and like having the chance to play him twice and like get closer to him and bond. What a gent.
Yeah.
Um,
An absolute gem as well. I really respect the way John plays the game as well. Like I remember at 1:30 in the morning, I was like, how has John got this much energy right now? Like the guy is like
this
live commentating everything he's doing. Like
it was so funny for the last 30 minutes. I told Justin Curtis, the head judge, I was like, Justin, I'm pretty sure for the last 30 minutes of this game, you have been playing John, not me. Because I'm like sitting down and Justin is like picking my models and measuring like charge distances. And John is like, yeah, but if I go here, and Justin is like, yeah, he could. Like, I'm not even playing this game. I'm so tired.
Yeah. Oh dear. What a great event. Yeah, I mean, so many memories there. It's so cool to see everyone, and hopefully, I think Boris, you get selected for Team England, and then you can travel to the WTC as well because it is like that. But even it's a little bit better only because it's a team environment and all the you can just wander the tables at the same time and see just the craziest games as well. I mean, you could do that there at One World Champs as well. That's one of the coolest parts too, is that you can go for a wander and you're like, oh, this guy's playing this guy, and you're like, wow, sick, right?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I have been really, really motivated this year. It's the first time I've applied for, for England, obviously going to the WTC. I've been really motivated. I've worked hard at it as part
Hmm.
of the, but coming out of this event, I feel like 10 times more motivated because not only did I play against and meet like a bunch of other WTC players, which
Hmm.
kind of is a foreshadowing of what, and you kept telling me this, like, I was like, oh, Lim's awesome, Tom's awesome, this,
Mm.
Arn, Fred, this is like, and you're telling me like, yeah, bro, that's what WTC is like. And I felt very like inspired
Yeah.
to want to be part of that even more. Up to this point, it was more like taking our teammates' word for it
Yeah.
because all of you guys were there except Chris and I last year, and you're saying this is the greatest event. And it was, I was motivated because of the feedback from the teammates, but I kind of got to get a glimpse of it, and coming out of it is like, okay, I'm even more motivated. I'm gonna work even harder. Chewy, what I have to do to get on the team, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, being a part of the story for your nation for WTC is so incredible as well. Like one of the happiest moments of jubilation was when, Team New Zealand, and Vic can probably attest to this, was when we won the best newcomer. And like on live stream, I just fucking leapt off my chair. So let's fucking go, shouting and stuff. Yeah, it's moments like that that are just some of the coolest moments as well. So I hope you get to write your narrative at the WTC as well. And I think if anything, it shows that you're more than prepared to play at the caliber level of WTC. And in fact, I think if I'm being brutally honest, you know, some of the lower seed teams, those games are going to be, substantially easier than probably what you played at Warhammer World Champs. So I'd probably say Warhammer World Champs is the average is probably higher there. But what I would say is when you get to the very, very tightest of tight games, you're playing against people that know your list inside out, know the mission inside out, know how to deploy, just deploy everything instantly, right? So the absolute niche preparation is a lot more at WTC. But yeah, if you can grind at Warhammer World Champs, then I'd say you're easily at the caliber for WTC, in my opinion. Well, there we go. That's been the. I guess that's the recap. Boris, is there anything you want to? Any shout outs? Anything you want to chat about? Did we forget any topics?
I think we've given shout outs to the organizers and our opponents, and I just want to. I mean, again, this is what we started. This is the best event I've ever been to. We really missed Vic there. Everyone was asking about Vic, and we kept telling everyone he'll be back next year.
Next time.
And the best thing, as winning best overall, I already got my golden ticket,
Oof.
and so I don't have to stress about that because honestly, unlike you guys, right, that you go and compete and you regularly win these big events. As you know, I don't really go to singles events anymore. I mean, I haven't been to a UKC singles event in like 2 years.
Mhm.
So my chance to win a golden ticket was like, well, can I win best overall at Warhammer Fest again? I mean, probably not.
Yeah.
And then is that gonna give golden tickets for team events? Otherwise, I'm screwed, and I really want to go to this event. And when Mike announced that best overall, and I was like, oh, this makes me so happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're a caliber of player to win a singles event too, Boris. Anyway, but that's beyond me. I think you are right though in that the competition for golden tickets next year is going to be hotly contested as well. So I hope that there are some team events that we can get tickets for. I know that a lot of the United States events, the big team events, had tickets given out for them, so that'd be good. But what I would encourage you, if you are a TO, ask for your event to be covered for golden tickets and stuff like that. I think that a lot of TOs didn't apply because they didn't think their events were big enough, and I don't think that's the case. Games Workshop wants to give these tickets out. They want the top people to attend. So yeah, go and do that. And big shout out to Mike Brandt again as well. I think the event was run perfectly. Actually, what I didn't know is that Mike is actually a long-time WTC player as well, and he was actually watching, and I'm sure yours as well, Boris, like coming and watching a lot of my games for like 5 or 10 minutes at a time, and
Yeah, he was moving some of my models even.
Yeah.
It was that's how awesome it was.
I
He
was
was
like,
like, oh Mike, just move that there, measure it, whatever. Yeah, it was
yeah.
great.
And I was like, oh, have I done something wrong? Because the judges at my, the TO was at my table. He was like, no, I'm just watching. I was like, oh, that's good.
Dave, I'll give you one last snippet, which might be false excitement, but did you fill out the feedback survey that Games Workshop sent for the event?
I haven't done that yet. No, that's on my
Okay.
to-do list.
One of the questions there, okay, and maybe this is reading too much into it, had to do with the seating of the pods, okay, and this is what it said, all right? It said, in the absence of a organized, standardized international ranking system, do you think the pods were fairly ranked, okay, or appropriately ranked? And that immediately got me thinking, right? Is this like in the works for G-Dubs? Are they gonna do some sort of seeding and ranking next year based on something or the years to come? Because that would be a departure from anything they've done so far. Obviously, we've had the ITC, which we know has had its struggles and troubles, and it's kind of, well, for all intents and purposes, I think as far as many of us are concerned, no one really cares about ITC points anymore. But if the pods were seeded at some point by some metric, that could be cool.
Yeah, that could be really exciting. I think also like a couple of small things as well, like putting New Zealand is not strategically advantageous for my run at the tournament, for example, right? Which is it kind of sucks because I want to play for New Zealand, I want to represent New Zealand. It's my WTC team I play for, but at the same time, like if they did the pods the same way, I'd probably just put United Kingdom because for whatever reason, right? Because we just literally just seen our 8 best players, right? So yeah, there's kind of pros and cons. But yeah,
maybe I'm reading into it, but I read it as a little bit of a foreshadowing to say like, we did a random this year, guys. What do you think? But maybe if a universally recognized standardized ranking seating system was in place,
I hope they come up with something, man. I'm all for it. I hope Games Workshop does more events in the UK as well. I really enjoyed playing their events. I hope that they do a big grand narrative event that's not on the same weekend as a big singles event, because I would love to go play it, especially if it was like the one at Atlanta. I thought it was so cool. I would have to buy a Crusade book. I don't even know how to play it, so I would be keen for that personally. Nice. Vic, do you have any closing thoughts? Let him unmute himself. Nope. Forever hold your peace. This has been episode.
He has too much FOMO of not being there to say anything.
I am here. My thing just wasn't on.
Snapshot, a little bit of meta takeaway. Vic, from an outsider's perspective, I'll get you involved. What apparently we're going to have the balance status like in January, which feels like such a long way away. What are you kind of looking for in that? Like, what is the if we thought Aldari was the best army going into this, like, what is the reality? You know, how is the Warhammer World Champs kind of shaken up our perception of the meta? Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think there were 4 out of 8 uh, CSM in the top 8, maybe. They can probably correct me on that. Mm. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, and in fact, I think the Aldaris were out the bottom in the top 8 as well, actually, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, well, I think Yokel and Quinton were both Aldaris in the top 11, and then Liam VSL with Death Guard as well there. Yeah, so yeah, stack tournament, good fun. I would definitely go again. 10 out of 10. Brilliant. I'm looking forward to it next year, and I'm looking forward to working on some painting areas that I need to improve on as well. Inspired by yours truly, Boris Mitchev. It's been great having you on. Boris and I were leaving the event just as I was about to get my flight, and he was like, "Hey, David, like, you want to decompress a little from Warhammer? It's like we should play some Lord of the Rings games down at the shop." So
It's a nice little palate cleanser, but already on the plane, that's how long it took me to think that I'll decompress. I was browsing the Sisters Index and I was texting the group chat saying, maybe Sisters is my next hobby project.
just goes to
Uh,
show you.
the addiction
Every,
is strong.
the addiction is strong. There we go. All right, episode 39, the WCW recap with Boris. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, man. As always, of course, a dear friend and current member of Team Ignite, of course, as well. So the team did outstanding this year. We had 8 out of 8 players. Sorry, we had every single player have 8 out of 8 fantastic games, and that's the type of level of sportsmanship we love to bring. And that's kind of one of our core ethoses, I think, as well. And everyone that knows that when they come to play against one of our team players, they can have an absolutely fantastic competitive fair game where both players make mistakes, and then and then we just chat through when things do happen. What's the most likely cause and all that stuff. So that's how we like to rep it. We repped it at the World Champs, and there we go. Adieu, farewell, Boris. You can give the closing out.
Thank you very much for having me on. This has been the best event I've ever attended. I can't believe it's going to be a full year before we go again, but I'm already planning for it, thinking about it, getting excited. So I'll be there.
There we go. 39. Thank you very much. Have a good evening wherever you are. Cheers. Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.